Sit back and listen to some of the songs from 1973 and their stories you never knew. This was another year of incredible music that's been pushed aside by mainstream radio. Get ready to relive some amazing memories from 1973. Stealers will emerge from the Scottish folk scene, but their story isn't the happy tale you might expect. Formed by school friends Joe Egan and Jerry Rafferty in 1972, their relationship was already deteriorating when they recorded Stuck in the Middle with You. The band was literally falling apart during the recording sessions, with Rafferty having already quit once and then rejoined.
Yes, I'm stuck in the middle with you, and I'm one.
The irony of Stuck in the Middle with You is that it was written as a parody of Bob Dylan's Paranoia period and the music industry in general. The record executives didn't catch the joke, and the song became a hit despite essentially mocking them. The production team of Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, known for their work with Elvis Presley, helped craft the sound, though they reportedly clashed with the band throughout the process. Here's something most people don't know. The famous clown costume worn in the Reservoir Dogs scene that made this song famous again in 1992 was actually inspired by a photo of Jerry Rafferty performing in similar attire at a Scottish folk festival in 1973. However, Rafferty hated the film's use of the song and refused to allow it to be used in the soundtrack album. King Harvest's path to creating Dancing in the Moonlight was anything but smooth. The band formed in Paris of all places, made up of American musicians who'd fled to France to avoid the Vietnam War draft. The original version of the song was recorded by a completely different lineup of the band in 1969, which failed to chart. The 1973 version we know today was actually recorded by the third lineup of King Harvest, and ironically, most of the original members never got to enjoy its success. The song's writer, Sherman Kelly, wrote it while recovering from a brutal attack by gang members in the Caribbean. He envisioned a world where people could feel safe enjoying music together under the moonlight, making the song's carefree vibe even more poignant. The band's recording equipment broke down multiple times during the session, and they had to record the final version using borrowed gear from a neighboring studio where Cat Stevens was recording. Stevens reportedly popped his head in and suggested the distinctive keyboard sound that would make the song instantly recognizable. Dobie Gray's Drift Away struck gold in 1973, but the path there was far from certain. Gray had actually been performing under different names since the early 1960s, including Leonard Ainsworth and Larry Dennis, trying to find his place in the industry while facing significant racial barriers in the music business. The song almost never made it to Gray. Mentor Williams, who wrote Drift Away, initially offered it to Elvis Presley, who passed on it because Colonel Tom Parker thought the lyrics were too introspective for Elvis's image. John Henry Kurtz first recorded it in 1972, but his version failed to make an impact. Gray's distinctive voice and the addition of the Memphis horns transformed the song into something special. Few people realize that the original recording features a young Mark Knopfler on the guitar, years before he formed Dire Straits. This was one of his first major studio sessions, and he was paid just £15 for his contribution. Hey friends, if these memories are bringing back your own stories from 1973, don't keep them to yourself. Share them in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into forgotten classics. Hit that like button if you remember where you were when you first heard these songs. David Essex came from London's East End, and unlike many rock stars of his era, he'd already made a name for himself in musical theater before Rock On hit the charts. What many don't know is that Essex faced significant resistance from music producers who claimed his theatrical background would make him too polished for rock and roll. They wanted him to rough up his image, but he refused to change.
Hey, did you rock and roll, rock on?
The recording of Rock On was revolutionary for its time, though it caused significant tension in the studio. Producer Jeff Wayne stripped away conventional rock instruments, building the song around a unique bass line and minimal percussion. Several session musicians actually walked out during recording, believing the unconventional arrangement would ruin their reputations. The stark production style influenced countless new wave and post-punk bands in the following decade. The echo effect on Essex's voice wasn't created electronically. It was recorded in an empty swimming pool at Olympic Studios in London. The pool was later filled in during renovations, but not before Jimmy Page used the same space for parts of Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti. Focus, the Dutch progressive rock band, created Hocus Pocus during a period of intense internal conflict. While their record label pushed for more conventional rock songs, the band insisted on recording this experimental track featuring yodeling, whistling, and accordion. Their label initially refused to release it, calling it commercial suicide. The song's creation was particularly contentious between guitarist Jan Akkerman and flautist vocalist Thijs van Leer, who were barely speaking to each other at the time. The famous yodeling sections were actually recorded separately from the rest of the band, with Van Leer refusing to be in the same room as Akkerman. The tension somehow translated into creative energy that made the song unique. What many don't know is that the song gained much of its popularity through an accident. A DJ in Boston played it at double speed by mistake, and listeners loved it so much that this faster version became the standard for radio play. George Harrison's Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth emerged during a particularly difficult time in his life. While the public still viewed him as the quiet Beatle, Harrison was privately struggling with the massive expectations placed on him after My Sweet Lord and dealing with intense spiritual questioning. The recording sessions were marked by Harrison's increasing frustration with the music industry. He had just completed his groundbreaking concert for Bangladesh, but was angry about record companies profiting from charity events. This led to heated arguments with his own management team during the recording. Several musicians who played on the track later reported that Harrison would frequently stop mid-session to meditate, sometimes for hours. The song's distinctive slide guitar part was actually played on a guitar given to Harrison by Peter Frampton, though this wasn't revealed until years later. Harrison had forgotten his own guitar at home on the day of recording, and Frampton, who was recording in the studio next door, lent him his prized Gibson Les Paul. We hope you're enjoying this trip down memory lane. Be sure to drop your stories in the comments, and don't forget to share this video with other music lovers who remember these incredible times. Hit subscribe to join our community of music lovers who know that the best songs aren't always the most famous ones. Paul Simon's Kodachrome stirred up controversy before it was even released. Kodak's lawyers initially threatened legal action over the use of their trademark, though they later embraced the song after seeing its popularity. What many don't know is that Simon had never actually used Kodachrome film when he wrote the song. He chose the name purely for its sound. The recording process was plagued with technical difficulties. Simon insisted on recording with Muscle Shoals rhythm section, but their first attempts were deemed too country-sounding. The final version took 23 takes and nearly caused a permanent rift between Simon and the studio musicians, who felt he was too perfectionist. Interestingly, the song was never released as a single in Britain because BBC Radio wouldn't play it. They considered the line, "Everything looks worse in black and white," to be prejudicial, showing how different cultural sensitivities were in different markets. Wars, the Cisco Kid, marked a significant departure from their earlier sound, though record executives initially fought against its release. The band insisted on incorporating Latin elements into their funk sound, despite warnings that it would alienate their core audience. The recording captured a tense moment in the band's history, as they were dealing with the recent departure of Eric Burdon and trying to establish their own identity. The lyrics, celebrating a fictional Mexican folk hero, were seen as controversial by some radio stations in the Southwest who feared the song might inflame cultural tensions. Few fans know that the distinctive cowbell in the song was played by a studio intern who was simply helping to move equipment. The band liked his impromptu playing during a sound check so much that they asked him to play on the actual recording. Steely Dan's Do It Again almost didn't make it onto their debut album. Donald Fagen and Walter Becker were initially unsure about including it, considering it too commercial compared to their other material. The record company executives actually threatened to shelve the entire album unless they included it. The song's iconic electric sitar sound came by accident when guitarist Denny Diaz's regular guitar malfunctioned during recording. The replacement instrument had a faulty bridge that created the buzzing, sitar-like effect, which the band decided to keep. This happened during a time when most of the session musicians were frustrated with Fagen and Becker's perfectionism, often requiring 20 or more takes for each part. The Latin-influenced percussion break in the middle of the song was played by Jim Gordon, who would later be convicted of murdering his mother during a schizophrenic episode. The band rarely discussed this tragic connection in interviews. Gladys Knight and the Pips' Midnight Train to Georgia was originally written as Midnight Plane to Houston. The song underwent its transformation when Knight heard about the original version and convinced the songwriter, Jim Weatherly, that A Train to Georgia made more sense for her character and style. The recording session was a particularly emotional one because Knight was going through a divorce at the time, and the lyrics about following someone you love resonated deeply with her personal situation. The Pips' choreography, which they performed even in the recording studio while singing their backing vocals, became so iconic that other artists started copying their style. Few people realize that the distinctive opening piano riff was played by Pete Jolly, a jazz musician who is notorious for never playing a song the same way twice. The version we know was take 17, and the band couldn't recreate it exactly the same way when they performed it live. These songs from 1973 tell us something important about music and our memories. While the mainstream media might have forgotten these songs, they're still part of our story. Don't miss another video. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. Just know we appreciate you.